You all got so quiet there. Guess you're ready to rock and roll. Yeah. All right, the Committee on Economic Development and Small Business will come to order. Mr. Clerk, would you take the roll?
Chairman Hoskins.
Here.
Representative Grant. Whitsett.
Here.
Neely.
Here.
Liberati. Kofia.
Here.
Farhat. Miller.
Here.
Tisdale.
Here.
Van Workum.
Here.
Martin.
Here.
Roth. St. Germain.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 9 members in the quorum.
All right, thank you. I hope you all had a very restful in-district work period, or a busy one, depending on how you look at it. I think the rest of the year for us in the committee should be quite eventful. And starting today with Senator McDonald-Rivet's bill, Senate Bill 293. So if the good senator would come up, I think she's going to be joined by Director Hovey from MSHDA. We're going to do that at the end.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Hoskins, for giving us time on your agenda to talk about this bill, which I'm really excited about. Thrilled to be over on this side of the Capitol. I have to say that there's no free coffee over in the Senate committee, so I'd have to rethink my choices. So Senate Bill 293 is essentially about the Housing and Community Development Fund, which was actually put into place to seed innovation in the way that we are structuring our housing through MSHDA. What's really important to note is that for 20 years it was left unfunded. And as we look to move forward and solve for housing issues that are of deep priority in almost every one of our districts, it's intended to be able to provide some flexibility and while still assuring that the original intent of the fund is honored. So let me just tell you a little bit about what it does, and then I'll turn it over to Director Hovey. It adds the definition of middle income housing, which means about a household income of more than 120% AMI. So when I talk about this, I talk about, I'm a Gen Xer into my 50s, but when I was launching into adulthood, there was this rule of thumb that you should spend 2 years' salary on your first house. I don't know if anybody else was told that by their parents, but I was. It was the conventional wisdom of the day. Show me a market where you can buy your first house at twice your income now. It's just not there. So we hear over and over and over again across our districts, people saying housing has become unaffordable. The middle space in particular is just simply not there. And we've got a whole generation coming up that have lost the belief that they are ever going to own a home. So part of this is to take a step. It doesn't solve for it, but it takes a step down the road in helping work on this issue. This will allow MSHDA to create middle income households. It requires that the projects throughout the state it works with a requirement throughout the state to remove the explicit requirement to target downtown and adjacent areas, deletes a specific carve-out in the allocation plan, and adds the ability for the fund to support capacity building in local communities. In my district, that's particularly important as this capacity building is often very difficult in more rural areas. So as you get to the northern part of the state, we have to do a considerable amount of capacity building. I know right now in my district there's a little town called Auburn. It is primarily agricultural, has a couple of really great restaurants if you're ever in the area, but very, very little capacity in terms of housing development. So it will allow the fund to do those pieces as well. This was supported in a bipartisan way in the Senate, and encourage your support of the bill. And I'll turn it over to the director.
Good morning. Happy to be here today. We've been busy at MSHDA this year, and because you've seen my face several times, and lucky you, I'm going to be back here hopefully several more times before the end of the year. But thanks for considering eliminating some of the barriers to the Housing Community Development Fund. I want to thank you for passing a sustainable source of funding for this fund that will allow us to work with communities across the state to address the housing crisis. At MSHDA, we are busy implementing the first ever statewide housing plan. We've created 15 regions across the state for its implementation. Each region last week submitted their draft regional housing plan, where each region has brought folks together to talk about what are the goals for housing in that region, what are their priorities, and what are the values. At MSHDA, we intend to help implement those plans by funding those priorities. The only way that we can fund the priorities of those individual regions is to have funding that is more flexible. The majority of our funds from MSHDA come directly from the federal government and are highly designated for very specific types of activities, targeting very specific types of population. Those funds are also needed. We are asking for this flexibility so we can do something new. We can be responsive to what locals feel like they need to solve their individual housing crisis, rather than having the state always be prescriptive on how to get that done. Now, this isn't just MSHDA making decisions about how these funds will be spent every year. We need to, and as the law is drafted, we'll create a plan for how those funds are spent. That plan will be approved by the statewide housing partnership, which has representation from all different types of populations within our state to ensure that not only are we equitably spending the funds across the regions, but that we are using these funds to address the housing crisis in our state. I thank you for your consideration, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, members have questions. Vice Chair Tisdale.
Thank you, Chair Hoskins. This is for the senator or the director. So you were talking about your first-time home buyer situation. Those kinds of target properties, those moderately priced homes, what percentage of those homes are selling right now without subsidizing kind of middle income buyers?
Well, I can tell you a couple stats off the top of my head. One, the cost of a newly constructed home, about 1,200 square feet in the state of Michigan, is $375,000.
And that's a different story.
Nope,
But
I'm
in
not
that
done.
moderately priced area, what
we
percentage
have-
of those homes are selling right now without subsidy?
Well, I don't know exactly what your definition of moderately priced area is, but I can tell you that we, and I don't have the stats in front of me, but I'm happy to get them to your office, that folks that are making under 100% of our area median income are having a very difficult time being able to purchase a home of any kind. The affordability, we've had over a 30% increase in housing costs across the state. A for-sale home of any kind has increased 84% over the last decade, while our incomes in Michigan have only increased 25% during that same time. Those numbers make it apparent that more and more Michigan families are having a hard time purchasing a home. The housing and community development funds aren't specifically just for sale housing. They're also for rental. They also can be used for homelessness. We're just asking for the flexibility to be able to respond to your constituents on what their needs are.
Is there an excess of unsold first-time home buyer priced properties in the state?
Not any that I've heard of.
Right.
And in our conversations across the regions, this comes across as one of their highest priorities.
So my primary concern is that there appears to be unsubsidized buyers out there to soak up that kind of stock that's available, and would the state simply be creating competitors to bid up the price by subsidizing currently non-qualified or unable buyers to compete against those that can buy those homes?
I don't believe that's the case. And let me give you a couple ideas to think about. One is a lot of our housing stock right now is getting picked up by large investment firms and used for short-term rentals, which is exacerbating our housing crisis. We also have renters across the state that are becoming homeless, working folks becoming homeless because in their last time of their rental renewal, they've gone up 25 and 30%. They can't afford that. They're out looking for additional housing that's affordable to rent for their families, and they're not finding it. So we are asking for the flexibilities of these funds so that we can address the unique needs in each region. Sometimes it's short-term rentals are driving up the cost. Sometimes there's no availability of rental housing. Sometimes there's no availability of for-sale housing. So what we want are folks to be able to afford to have stable housing for the workers in the state and the children in the state.
And I appreciate your objective, and it was an interesting point that you raised that new construction is almost $400,000 now. And I think there's an area that we need to look at. Why is that so? Why is it that you cannot build a $150,000 to $180,000 house today in the state of Michigan, or really almost anywhere in the country? So thank you.
Yes.
All right, Representative Van Workum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little concerned about the mission creep of this legislation, of MSHDA being for low-income households and moving into this. You mentioned the statewide housing partnership. Obviously, MSHDA is not building properties, but it's builders, and then they certainly get profit off of the building here. By expanding this, are you going to see more builders far more interested in this market than doing the low-income market? How are you going to bifurcate that this is only for middle income, or is it going to creep that all of a sudden what the builders want to do, what they want to work with MSHDA, is more in this middle market because that's far more profitable than doing the low income?
So typically how our programs operate, and this isn't about a specific program, this is about a amount of funds that can be put to lots of programs, but we limit the amount of profit that developers and builders can make. So that is a controlled point from our end, right? So no, we're still going to have to be begging builders because we have a shortage of contractors and labor in this state, and it's much more profitable for them to do market rate than to do attainable housing, right? We're going to be having to be creative in trying to get this housing done. That's why it's typically nonprofit developers that are really kind of digging into your scattered site infill and the rehab of existing housing stock. Most of our for-profit developers are doing our LIHTC type of funding, which is multifamily. This will not be used for the LIHTC funding.
All right, you're all set. All right. I have a quick question, and this kind of came up in the Senate testimony, just talking about as we are adding this missing middle housing, is that going to potentially take away funding from the other potential people who need housing? And also, could you talk about the different programs that you offer at MSHDA that kind of offset that?
Yes, and I'm happy to share with your committee a document that we put together actually for the Senate that outlines the different programs that MSHDA has for the different income levels. And it varies, quite honestly. But we have about $284 million a year that we put towards homelessness. We have $841 million that goes towards housing for folks below 80% of area median income. We have currently $100 million that's for workforce housing. Thank you very much. That was the missing middle funding. As you can see, we still have the majority of the funds at MSHDA are targeted towards folks below 80% of area median income. Even if we spent the entire 50 on families above 80, the majority of our funds by far at MSHDA would still be at below. And I just want to be clear. We are not suggesting that the full $50 million in the Housing Community Development Fund is going to be for folks over 80%. We're asking for flexibility so that we can respond to the priorities and the needs and the values of the regions across the state telling us what they need. So we are not anticipating that the full 50 are going to be for folks that are above 80% of area median income.
I'd like, if I could also just add that the department often finds itself with the constraints that are currently on, not being able to deploy funds in a community because they are so tightly restricted. But we worked very closely with the Housing and Homeless Coalition when the bill was in the Senate committee and adopted some amendments that they asked for to make sure that that we were not going to get to a place where there were dollars not going into the communities that need it the most.
Okay. All right, thank you. Representative Kofia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator and Director Hovey, for this bill and for your testimony today. I just more wanted to add a little bit of color from what I know and what I'm hearing from my folks in Northern Michigan. The issue of access to housing, whether it's affordable housing for service workers and lower income folks or missing middle, which this is attempting to address, is so acute. It was the #1 issue I heard as a county commissioner and on the doors last year. And just to, again, paint a little bit of a picture of how much I believe this adds another tool to the toolkit for our regions. The issue of missing middle income housing is so acute in my region that our hospital, which is one of our largest employers in the entire 10-county region, is now offering a year's worth of free housing and 5-figure bonuses to attract professional level, middle income jobs because they are having such an issue with folks accepting positions and then rescinding the offer based on simply not being able to find housing. My school districts are banding together to build educator housing because same issue. So this is a very urgent issue in my region and I know across the state. And I do see this as adding another tool to the toolkit, not to force the issue, but to offer more options. And in a more rural region, I do appreciate the flexibility around it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a project built in and around a downtown, because almost my entire region, other than the city of Traverse City, doesn't qualify then. But we do absolutely need tools like this. So thank you, and I just wanted to offer that perspective for the committee.
All right, thank you, Representative. And any other questions?
Yes, here.
Oh, Representative Miller.
I'm short, so I'm sure you don't see me. Good morning. Thank you for the work that you do. I have to add that when I bought my house, it is worth what you'd pay a car for. I made $7.50 an hour, and my husband made a little bit more than that. And it took us 3 years to save up enough for a down payment. You can't do that nowadays. We all know that. I have my own children who are adults, and also my staff paying more than what my current mortgage is. Unbelievable, $1,600 a month for an apartment. With that being said, how will you determine what the median income will be in each city? And because it's so vast, and I know this is a crisis. We have people living in hotels right now who aren't allowed to stay in the hotels, and they're being pushed out because we have township and city ordinances that say that they have to get out after 30 days. So, how will this address the corporations from coming in and buying up these properties? How do we slow that down?
I'm going to say one thing and then turn it right over to the director. But I think it's really important. And when I opened my comments, said this is one step down a very long path that we have to take. So this bill is not intended to be the solution for the missing middle housing crisis. But it is. I believe that we have incredible, dynamic, visionary leadership at MSHDA right now, and to the extent that we can give the kind of flexibility in the various funds to be able to work hand in glove with local communities who are doing the planning on this, that we have an obligation as a legislature to be able to give that flexibility, because doing nothing is not an option.
So we do work with each of the regions and looking at their data. So at MSHDA, we have some great staff that pull together some good housing data to kind of arm each region with what their needs are based on their income levels. And so we help them to kind of determine what income levels are most important for them to address. And then they pull a bunch of different folks together and really figure out what their priorities are. And then we design programs that will be restricted to those income levels. So some of our programs, as I mentioned, are restricted to folks between 60 and 80%, some below that. Even missing middle only goes up to 120% of area median income, which really helps us to get to the teachers, MSHDA staff, and other state workers and local municipality workers across the state. So we really work hand in hand with the local municipalities to determine what income levels need to be prioritized. And then the programs are restricted to those income levels.
All right, Senator, I know you have to head out, so I'm just going to end it here. But thank you so much for your testimony. For members, this is just testimony only today, so we won't be voting it out, but we most likely will be voting it out in our next meeting. I am going to read in some cards of support, starting with Heath Lowry from the Michigan Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence, not wishing to speak in support of the bill. Jessica Akmoudi with the Community Economic Development Association of Michigan, not wishing to speak in support of the bill. Judy Allen from the Michigan Townships Association, not wishing to speak in support of the bill. Evie Sweeney, representing the Michigan Housing Council, not wishing to speak in support of the bill. Ryan Knight from the Michigan Realtors, not wishing to speak in support of the bill. And that is it. All right. All right, moving on to our next bill, Senate Bill 397. Looks like we have Lauren Bohack from Senator Kavanaugh's office, as well as Director Hovey once again. All right, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, members of the committee. My name is Lauren Bohack. I'm Chief of Staff to Senator Mary Cavanaugh, the sponsor of Senate Bill 397, and she sends her apologies that she could not be here with you all today. Senator Cavanaugh also serves as the chair of the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on LEO, which is the department under which MSHDA is housed. So we've worked very closely with Director Hovey and her team this year on the agency's needs for the coming years as Michigan continues to face a housing crisis. One of the bills that we've worked on together is Senate Bill 397, which is a very simple bill with an in-depth explanation. This bill would raise MSHDA's current bond cap of $5 billion to $7 billion. And I will turn it over to Director Hovey to explain why this is necessary.
Sorry, you got to see me twice one morning, but I thank you again for your time. This is a very, very important bill to the authority. Two of our main programs are our single-family housing, our mortgage program that comes with a down payment assistance program that helps families be able to purchase a home. And then our low-income housing tax credit program through the federal government, which helps fund multi-family housing for families, mostly 60% and below area median income, but in some cases it can go up to 80%. We cannot operate those programs without borrowing funds. And we are about to hit our cap. We're looking at hitting the $5 billion mark in October. If we do not get this increase, we'll have to shut down two of our largest programs in the state at that time. Let me tell you a little bit about our funding history. So the funds that we're asking for the ability to borrow are not state obligated funds. So I just want to say that again. They're not state obligated funds, meaning that the state has no obligation to repay those funds. They are backed by real estate at Mishta. We have a great team of experienced staff in underwriting our loans. We have not once defaulted on any of our borrowings in the history of the authority, even during times such as COVID, where the housing market kind of turned upside down, or during 2008 when we had the housing recession. We have a very stringent practice before we borrow any funds. Like most investors, we need to go through bond rating companies who rate the authority and our balance sheet, and making sure that we're healthy financially and have the ability to repay funds, and have the guidelines in place that allow us to be smart borrowers and smart lenders. We are a highly rated authority at this point. So we need to increase that cap. Typically, we haven't gone through funds as quickly, but because we're in a housing crisis, and because you all very graciously gave us $150 million for multifamily gap financing, we have been going through our funds a little bit more quickly than had been originally anticipated. So we're here today to ask for that increase to allow us to keep operating within the state of Michigan. Happy to take any questions.
All right, any questions from committee members? Representative Van Workum.
Can you tell us just kind of what the rates are right now for these bonds, and maybe comparison from last time it was raised to this time?
Yeah, we certainly can.
All right. Go ahead and sit down here. Okay. You're talking about the rates that the authority pays on the bonds themselves? Yeah. We had historically low interest rates going into 2021. So we were seeing, and I'm going to just stick with sort of the long-term bonds. We were seeing rates in the high 2s, low 3s. Interest rates, since the beginning of 2022 have gone up quite a bit. We just priced a bond issue, and we're looking at rates in the mid to high 5s.
So that's the current rate, is mid to high 5s?
On our borrowing, yes.
Yeah. And just kind of doing the books, you said you never defaulted. Its potential rates will go even higher. Is there a concern of being able to this? What is the impact of these rates on the Mishta budget moving forward?
Well, the excuse me, from a budget standpoint and from a security standpoint, when we sell the bonds, fixed rate bonds, the vast majority of our bonds are fixed, and we have fixed rate mortgages. So those particular bond issues, those assets and liabilities, we don't expect any concern with those. Going forward, what ends up happening is, that's correct. So if our cost of borrowing goes up, what we have to do is increase the rate at which we lend. The interesting thing from this standpoint is you would think that as interest rates go up, things would kind of slow down. There's a difference between what the authority can borrow at and what other borrowers are borrowing at taxable rates. We're borrowing at tax exempt rates. So what it does is that it increases the difference between what an individual can get in the conventional markets as compared to being able to come to the authority. So the authority can offer rates that are lower than what they would be able to get somewhere else. Thereby, we actually see production go up a little bit.
You're all set.
How is your tax exempt comparable to other cities on the bond market right now? You're at 5.5, isn't it higher elsewhere? What is driving people to this bond rather than a city municipal bond? And then I think I just read in the Wall Street Journal recently that it's actually pretty marginal of what the difference is between a taxable bond and a non-tax bond.
The difference between non-taxable and taxable isn't marginal. We sell taxable bonds as well. You can see 100 to 150 basis points higher for selling taxable bonds. That is, you know, pretty meaningful. As our rates compared to like a typical municipal, it's kind of like comparing apples and oranges. The issue is a typical municipality or the state treasurer may issue debt and they have maturities, sort of. This is when the funds are due. Investors have certainty when it's due and what their interest rate's going to be. The issue when you sell mortgage-backed securities is that there are redemption provisions, meaning that if interest rates were to go down, say, the person that's holding the mortgage that we've purchased will see interest rates go down and they'll refinance. And when they refinance, those proceeds come back to us. And when they come back to us, we call the bonds early. So what I'm getting at here is that an investor can look at a typical investment and there's certainty. If you look at a mortgage-backed security, there's a little bit of uncertainty because you don't know if you're going to get called out early. And because of that, housing-backed debt tends to be a little bit more expensive because of that uncertainty.
All right. I have a quick question. So I'm going to be offering an amendment to raise the cap from $7 billion to $10 billion, and I just want you to kind of speak about the need for that, if you could.
Yeah, so we typically only come back about every 5 years to ask for an increase in our lending cap. But because of the increase in the cost of housing, which has gone up, as we've talked about previously, about 30% in the last couple of years. And because of the increase in our productivity in response to the housing crisis, if we pass at 7, you guys will see me back here late next year asking for another increase rather than in 5 years, which has been our typical practice in the history of the authority. So what we would really love is for it to be 10 billion, so you won't see us back for at least 2 or 3 years.
All right, thank you. Representative Tisdale.
Thank you, Chair Hoskins. And again, along those lines, I guess my question is, you've never had a default. In the analysis, we're looking at the properties that are being, the debt is being leveraged against. Based on the last discussion, those houses are selling rapidly on the market. There's a scarcity of them. The mortgages themselves are paying for the debt. Why, I guess, so my question is, why is there a cap at all?
That's a great question. Other state agencies don't have caps, but MSHDA does, and so we're here asking for the increase. I don't know the history of why we have a cap and other agencies don't, but we'd be happy to accept that amendment.
Is there some market distortion that we're trying to avoid by capping it?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, any other questions from members? All right, thank you, Director. I'm going to read in some cards in support of this. Starting with Jessica Moody from the Community Economic Development Association of Michigan, not wishing to speak in support of the bill. Ryan Knight from the Michigan Retailers, not wishing to speak in support of the bill. Evie Sweeney, representing the Michigan Housing Council, not wishing to speak in support of the bill. All right, we're going to be taking that up for a vote in a minute, but first we are going to vote out Representative Kofia's bill, House Bill 4618, which we took testimony on June 13th. Let's see. Representative Neely moves to report House Bill 4618 with recommendation. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chair Hoskins,
Yes.
Representative Grant, Whitsett,
Yes.
Neely,
Yes.
Liberati,
Yes.
Kofia,
Yes.
Farhat,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Tisdale,
Yes.
Van Workum,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Roth,
Yes.
St. Germain,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, on the motion to report with recommendation, you have 12 yeas, 0 nays, 0 pass, motion prevails.
All right, thank you. All right, now I'd like to offer that amendment to Senate Bill 397, which will raise the cap from 7 billion to 10 billion, as we heard earlier. See, Representative Whitsett moves to adopt the amendment. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Hoskins,
Yes.
Representative Grant, Whitsett,
Yes.
Neely,
Yes.
Liberati,
Yes.
Copio,
Yes.
Farhat,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Tisdale,
No.
Van Workum,
No.
Martin,
No.
Ross,
No.
St. Germain.
No.
Mr. Chair, on the motion to amend Senate Bill 397, you have 7 yeas, 5 nays, 0 pass, the motion prevails.
All right, thank you. I now need a motion to report Senate Bill 397 as a new substitute with recommendation. Representative Liberati moves to report Senate Bill 397. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chair Hoskins,
Yes.
Representative Grant, Whitsett,
Yes.
Neely,
Yes.
Liberati,
Yes.
Copio,
Yes.
Farhat,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Tisdale,
No.
Van Workum,
No.
Martin,
No.
Ross,
No.
St. Germain.
No.
Mr. Chair, you have 7 yeas, 5 nays, 0 pass, the motion prevails.
All right, thank you. All right, one last thing to do. I am going to read in the letter that I sent to you all referring a number of bills to the Housing Subcommittee. Let's see, I'm referring the following House bills to the Subcommittee on Housing. The following bills were referred to the Housing Committee, to the House Committee on Economic Development and Small Business, and the subject is germane to the goals of the subcommittee. House bills 4818, 4878, 4891, and 4919 all deal with the crucial subject of housing. I've decided to ask the Subcommittee on Housing to review and make recommendations on this bill package. Ensuring the availability and affordable and accessible housing throughout the state remains a top priority for this committee. This legislation presents an opportunity for the subcommittee to delve into related issues in greater detail with all interested parties. I trust that the subcommittee will be successful and productive. Sincerely, me. Representative Miller moves to approve the minutes for the June 13th meeting. Without objection, so ordered. And Representative Farhat moves to excuse absent members. Without objection, so ordered. There being no further business before the committee will stand adjourned.